So I'll tell you a little bit about how Any Questions came about at CAMERIMAGE maybe 6, 7 years ago, is that I'd been coming here for some while and noticed that every panel that happened after every film was focused very specifically on the film. And often the really interesting discussion would happen just at the end. Just as like people were being thrown out, the topic would become interesting, it would get going. So there's an English radio program called Any Questions. So I basically stole the format. But that one, they're all politicians. And so it's not, it's no fun. So the idea of this is that it's a little bit more lighthearted, hopefully. People send questions in, but sometimes they don't. This time I have got a few sent in, so I'll probably start with one of them. But before I do, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, because I don't like introducing people. I forget their names.
All right, Ed Lockman, displaced person.
So I'm Jean-Marie Drejot, I'm a French cinematographer. And after film school in 1979, I started as an assistant during 14 years. And after I start as a cinematographer. I'm very lucky because with my first movie, I was nominated in French awards, so it was me very help for all my career. And so I'm still working, so I'm very happy.
Bonjour, Pascal Marin. I'm a French DOP too. I graduated the Louis Lumière School in Paris 20 years ago. When I was out of school, I in parallel was a DOP on short films and a camera assistant on different scales of project, from a little slasher movie to author film or even blockbusters. And while I was shooting short films, some of the directors were happy enough with my job to ask me to come for their first feature, and that was how I entered the art.
I'm Charlotte Bruce Christensen, and I'm a Danish cinematographer. I went to the NFTS also, 18 years ago. And I tried to assist but everything was out of focus and I was completely useless. So I'm in need of a great team always. So I did a lot of short films, and one of them were seen by Thomas Vinterberg. So I did 3 movies with Thomas, and that sort of moved on to other projects around the world, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm Natalie Kingston. I'm an American cinematographer, originally from a small town in Louisiana called New Iberia. I live in Los Angeles now. I did not go to film school, just had a very winding path, but the short story is just kind of really started shooting short films with friends and just learned by trial and error. And it's my first time here at CAMERIMAGE, and I'm so grateful to be here amongst these very talented cinematographers.
I'm Alana Mejia Gonzalez. I started as a child actor. I studied political science and I worked as a photojournalist. And one day I decided that applying to the NFTS will turn me into a cinematographer, which felt like the only job capable of combining all these skills into one profession. And I've been a student of Oliver, so we had events like this at our time at the NFTS, and I'm very grateful to be here with these inspiration cinematographers.
My name's John de Boorman, born in France, but have done my work in mostly Britain and America. I came from a background of art school background. I was a sculptor, and I was I never was able to sell any of my sculptures. So I decided to become a cameraman instead, and I've done 40 movies and still going.
I'm Autumn Durald Arkapaw. I started undergrad in art history. I'm from Los Angeles, or I grew up in the Bay Area in California, but I went to undergrad in art history and then AFI for my graduate in film. And it's my first time here at CAMERIMAGE.
Right, so is Antonia Schaffer in the room? Ah, right. Well, I'm just going to ask you to ask your question that you kindly sent me last night. I warned you.
Microphone.
Yes.
Thank you
go.
so much. I have to concentrate for a moment. I'm really. So I was wondering, what do you guys think the most what do you guys think a cinematographer has? What's the most? Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I don't like to speak in a lot.
I've got it written down.
Yeah, thank you. So what do you think the most important skill? Can you just read it for me? Sorry.
Yeah, half of what you said is perfect. What, in your opinion, is the most important skill a cinematographer needs to have that can't really be taught? Now, the reason I chose this question is it's actually a really good question. And since Antonia's coming to our film school next year, I think she's fishing for what she needs to learn that she's not going to learn. That was my feeling. So it's a great question. And who would like to start off with an answer to that one? Okay.
Oh. You want me to go?
I think it's persistence. I think you have to never give up, whereas it's for the image you try to reach for the good of the film, or in front of bad weather, in front of low budgets, in front of times with no films. So yeah, persistence, and film school don't teach you that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's knowing who you are, honestly. Like, you have to trust your instinct and trust your gut. But you have to have a good sense of the story you want to tell and the vision that you want to put out there, because you have to run a crew and you have to be able to assist your director. And if you're confused about who you are and what you want to say, I think it can be complicated, and no one can help you find that, except yourself.
So I think you're right. It's instinct, and also it's to do with understanding what you don't like. So you understand what you do like and be able to pre-visualize and visualize and find a way of doing that. And nobody can teach you that, because that's your opinion and your taste. And so you have to find your own taste and your own way of creating images, framing, and lighting.
That I don't learn in school is because I learn all the technologies. So to learn that in school is perfect. But that I don't learn that our job is not technology. It's also the technology part is about 10 or 15%, and the rest is psychological thing, And they don't learn that our job is a very important part of psychology to manage all the thing on the set.
Yeah, going along with that, for me, the hardest job is figuring out how to work with the director. So because every director's personality is different, you have to be their friend, you have to be their psychologist, and you're also many times thought of as the enemy. So maybe that's more of an American thing, because of time and pressure, because I haven't felt that in Europe, that you're more of a collaborator when I work with a lot of European directors. But I think that's the hardest thing, is to figure out how you can interface with the director to help them with their vision.
Just adding, because I very much agree, there is something about knowing what you think is right in a moment. So, and that will always be a conversation, but you need to know how to articulate your vision that obviously should, you know, collaborate with the director's vision. But there's also this, that's just agreeing, but there's also the thing of reading, for fiction anyway, reading a script and building your vision from the text, you know, being a good reader and understanding why that story speaks to you, because you would be hired because you're you, because there's a lot of great cinematographers. So there's something about presenting your vision while also collaborating with the director.
I think, yeah, I'm a very strong believer in knowing who you are and understanding your perspective, what art you're drawn to and why. And then building off of that, which no one ever teaches you or talks about, is the interview process before you even get the job. Because that is an art in itself, and not a lot of people talk about it. So it's preparing for that interview with the director, reading the script a couple times, doing research, and coming to that interview prepared to be able to articulate your perspective, and then to be able to kind of meet in the middle with the director. But just being strong in your perspective and just understanding the story. And then just knowing how to navigate an interview with somebody you possibly have never met before.
Yeah, I think the psychology that you have in that process before you jump on a project, but also once you're in the project, and how you collaborate with the director, but also how you collaborate with the team around you, that is going to be essential to make a film. Because one of the things that I think is very challenging is that every time you jump on a project, there's people you don't know at all, and then the psychology to understand who these are, what are their best skills, and how you can communicate what you want to do, how they get things done. I mean, the director is the closest and the person that guides you through all the different stages of the process, but everybody also on your own team, or even production or other departments, I think understanding who they are, and even if you might be very different, how you can come across, because I'm sure if they're there, it's because they have something valuable, and finding a way that your skills and your way of communicating what you want to do for the project can also be a way of bringing their own skills and then get the best. Yeah.
By the way, when people are talking up here, anybody who wants to say anything or comment, please put your hand up, and one of these kind people will give you a microphone, okay? Yeah, so of these words that we've just heard, I think articulation for me is the key. And one of the things we do, because I teach at the NFTS in the UK, and in the first week of the new intake, I always listen to the way people express themselves, and occasionally someone who turns out to be actually a really brilliant cinematographer, but they come in and you ask them a question and you hear, yeah, well, like, yeah, you know, and the moment I hear that, I always speak to that student afterwards and say, okay, within the next 2 years, you're going to get rid of all of that. Because on set, you have about 10 seconds, right, to respond to the director, to the producer, to people who come to talk to you. You have to be very clear. If you have an idea on set and you wish to speak with the director, you can't be doing the maybe like thing, because they'll move on. You know, they just won't be listening. So a very important part of the early learning to be a DP is also learning to be clear with your thinking, but even more importantly, to say it clearly. Because then you can, you know, move at the kind of speed that producers like, although I can never do that, but I try. Mostly fail, but okay, good. Anybody want to contribute to that? Yes, the gentleman with the glasses on the left side there. This microphone thing is... Ugh.
I'd like to ask a question about deep focus, a bit maybe technical, but why is there so few films currently nowadays that are not shot with like very, very large depth of field as we might have seen in the old days. I'm thinking about Kurosawa or Citizen Kane. Is it because of some technical limitations, or is it about because time limitation?
I mean, I don't know. That's probably the. But I think, I don't know, there's a thing of people wanting to shoot 1.4 or not have any big lights in it. I spoke to a focus puller not long ago in New York, and she was saying, oh, the last movie I was on, I had to have a light on my head for me to actually see what I was doing, because the LED lights were so. I don't know if it's a trend. I just want to say I don't know, but I'm thinking there's a trend at the moment where the light level is incredibly low, so the focus pullers actually have to have a torch to see. I don't know.
Bradford Young.
What do you think, Ed?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot, and I think why is a lot of young cinematographers, and maybe some older ones, think it gives it more of a film look because of what's out of focus is somehow the facsimile of grain. I never liked that because for me it just looks like it's a digital effect. So I always shoot high stop. And it's interesting when I asked Jean-Marie about his film Notre Dame. He shot in that church in high stops. Even to get the fire effect, he told me he shot f/22. I couldn't believe it.
Yes, you're right. But that I can do, I shot a film with a digital thing in 2002. It was the Two Brothers with Jean-Jacques Hano. And Jean-Jacques Hano wants to shoot with a digital thing because he wants to have a very long takes. And so at this moment, the digital thing, it's only the sensor was like my finger, and so the lenses is very wide. So I use 8, 10, 12 millimeters. So it was a nightmare for me. And to cut the digital thing, I use wide open, so normally 1.3, 1.4. And 10 years ago, after, there is a sensor, a big sensor is coming. So I try to rework with all my meaning of the 35 mm, So I return with a large depth of field.
I actually heard that on Citizen Kane they had much more time to prepare like the composition of the frame, and so that they could allow themselves to do that kind of very well composed frames and deep focused stuff. Don't know if it's true.
Yes.
I mean, I shoot it. My favorite stop is because I like the way my lenses behave at that stop, and I have to have a director and a team that's on board with that, honestly. But my lens behaves differently than at a 2.8 than it does at a 4. The flares are different, the fall off's different, and we detune them, for a very specific look. So, and I always really shoot anamorphic. So I think for me, it's a personal preference, but it's after years and years of just like shooting with different lenses. But I don't really do it for lighting. At least that's not my first agenda.
Yeah, and it's horses for courses. You depending on what you want, you have a style. You don't. It's not a rule. You do whatever you want for the specific film that you want to do to give it the look that you want, and that can vary. So there's no rules in any of the stuff that we do.
But I think the question's focusing on why is 90% of current cinematography got super out of focus backgrounds, and you're absolutely right, it does. So I'd be interested if anybody has an opinion about why that has come by culturally.
Large format is one of the newest tools in the market, and that doesn't help in terms of depth at all. So I think it's something that we are all like, okay, let's explore this. It's also imposed by certain platforms, and I mean, I guess it's what we have to use because it's the new thing, and we are trying to like, get to know the tool that we have and use it in creative ways. I think it's also a trend. I've worked with directors that were very interested in composition and in terms of depth, and other directors who really didn't want to see the background. And they were, both of them, of the ones I have in my mind, they were quite young. But in terms of the work for like TV series, yeah, I was imposed on working on large format, and that meant that I couldn't do what I would have done maybe in other projects because of the depth that the format comes with.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you know, it's a question of look, so you have to go for what look you want. And if you have a big stop, you need a lot of light. And often you don't have the time to do that, or it's not appropriate, or whatever.
Or the budget.
Or the budget. So, you know, you'd have to take all those considerations in context.
I'm wondering too if that trend started early on in the DSLR revolution of shooting wide open, and just like Ed, like you were saying, getting a more filmic, soft feel, and that was an instant way to create that. Yeah.
One thing you'll notice with documentaries sometimes is people go off to Delhi or to Bombay to make a documentary, and then you see the result, and there's somebody talking in the foreground, and the background's completely soft, and you think, well, why didn't they stay in London? You know, it really is, it drives me crazy because, but it's trendy, it is a trend. And people in our world talk a lot about bokeh and detuning and da-da-da. Of course, flare's a trend. You know, when I started, if you got flare, you got fired. It was pretty simple, you know. And then, you know, then what's it called? Star Trek came along and flares everywhere. And suddenly that was Oscar winning, so now you win Oscars for flares. So it is a trend, I feel, and I actually don't think there's any technical reason not to use deep focus, even on large format, because you can use an ISO now of 5,000 and it looks pretty good. You know, so as time goes by, the joy is that we get given more and more goodies, and so that we don't have excuses actually for not creating a diversity of work in terms of depth. And it's a bit of a thing I have that I agree with you that it's a little dull to just have continuous out of focus backgrounds.
Just thinking about it and listening to all the replies, I'm wondering whether it's just something that has happened with the development of our cameras and going digital, and that it's such a sensitive sensor that you shoot 800 or people shoot more than that. And so it's just, you'd have to ND down, you know, to get, so it's whether it's just what has happened with the very sensitive sensors, you know, so the trend may have just come with the development of the technical equipment. Who knows?
And also right at the beginning when digital started, the chip was so small that everything was in focus and it was ugly. I mean, simply as that, you know, it was really ugly. So you had to break it down as much as possible. And now the sensors are bigger, we've just stayed in the habit of having less stop.
I think we've been in the Bradford area for a while, and I think that'll
Even this
move
whole
on.
discussion of bokeh, I'm old enough, we used to call it out of focus. And then it became a marketing tool to call it bokeh, what it looks like out of focus. So it's just trends come in. You know, Gordon Willis did this in a film, I think Interiors, and everybody was in awe because he used a wide-angle lens outdoors. He ND'd it, you know, like f/45 or whatever came down, and the background was out of focus. I mean, the only time I've been asked to do that is with a wider lens is that you want to separate the character from the background. But I just think it's a technique that's overused.
Okay, so yes, with the hat, hit right here.
Hey, thank you so much. Just to switch gears a second, I'm always really fascinated by scaling up and like kind of training your mind as a cinematographer in terms of vision and size of vision, in terms of thinking in the size of a feature film and keeping a consistent kind of a thematic theme in it, but also in terms of kind of the scaling of responsibilities and what that means as you grow, like through your career. I'm just curious about that from the ones who are coming from an early career and also from the ones who have had quite a long career. I think it's an interesting.
So when you say scaling up, you mean so you might spend 5 years doing really small, low-budget things, and then suddenly somebody gives you a $10 million film and then a 50 million. Is that what you mean by scaling up?
Yeah. Yeah,
to
because
deal with
I
that?
feel it's like it's a really tremendous brain exercise to suddenly like relinquish a lot of your own responsibility and trust into a team, into all of these bigger things, logistics and size of team and all of this. I'm just curious about your experience.
How to work with multiple camera crews, lots of people, how to manage that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just not so technical, but more kind of like within yourself, like how that feels to have to start to expand that vision for yourself.
How it feels to sell out. Is that what you're saying? Okay, who wants to go there?
I think it goes back to, like, for me, I had just done independent films and commercials before I shot this TV show, Blackbird, which is why I'm here, and got the opportunity to shoot the whole limited series, and I'd never done that before, so it was a big step up for me. And I think it all goes back to kind of like the core of it all, of you as an artist, as a cinematographer, of being confident in your perspective and what you're drawn to, and being able to articulate that effectively and communicate to a larger team, larger than you've had on any other project before. And just doing your homework and being prepared as ever, you know, but holding that confidence. And yeah, I think that was a big thing. And trusting your gut. I went back to that a lot when I would feel overwhelmed. It's like, okay, just what are my instincts saying? And that would always guide me in the right direction. And asking questions when you don't know, just to be able to make an informed, no one starts this knowing everything. So asking those who are more experienced and then making an informed decision with that information that you have.
Yeah, it was a similar experience for me. I did a lot of shorts, and then my first long form was a Netflix show, very large scale. And I remember calling a friend who just wrapped his second or third TV show and like asking for advice. And then he said, well, it's kind of the same thing that doing the shorts. Just remember that when you're there, like doing something small, and then you want to point this side of the room, and then suddenly everybody has to rush and move boxes, and it's like, oh, this is where I want to shoot. It's the same thing on big and larger projects. It just tracks instead of boxes, so it will take more time, and you lose more time on what you actually want to do in the frame. And I thought that was a good metaphor, because it wasn't just about the physicality or the size of what you were moving, but also at the end, the tools of what you do in a smaller project is similar to what you do in a bigger one. It's just that the scale gets bigger, and if you want certain things, you need to either plan ahead earlier, take more time to conceptualize the whole of a feature. You take more time, it's obvious, and then like managing crew. Like it's true that for me the big jump was that I realized I was not just a cinematographer, but also a manager of a larger project. And I mean, that helped me learn a lot of skills about myself, and I think it was positive at the end, but it was a big challenge. And I think going back to what everybody kind of said at the beginning, of knowing who you are and what you want to do, was essential to learn as I was going and growing in the scale of the new projects.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you get bigger, when you go from smaller and medium and then large, it's really about trust, right? Like to do like a job jump from like a studio film, $10 million to 60 or $80 million, it's about trust, right? Because they're only going off of the work that you had before and the recommendation of all the crew that you've worked with. So collaboration is so huge when you make these big jumps, because you have to have amazing crew, but you also have to have the trust of your director and all the people around you. And you know, your experience allows for that trust when people work with you, and then they have a good experience afterwards with you. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've found, is that inside, you know, you can do it, and people are always going to look at the numbers to, like, you know, weed you out or not give you the opportunity. But my biggest opportunities have pretty much come because the director trusted me and knew that I could do it, and I have a great crew that also trusts me to guide them. But so much of our job is management. When you get on the bigger scale, it's knowing what you want, because you have to answer quickly, but also how to manage, you know, hundreds of people to get what you want and to do it quickly.
Yeah, and controlling your nerves. You know, what you have to do is be assured in yourself that you've done everything you can to prep as much as you can, and you go to bed and sleep and find a way of sleeping and not worrying about it, because you've done the best you can, and you'll resolve it. You know, there'll be problems, there'll be things that won't work out or won't work out the way that you might have thought, but you've prepped it as much as you can. So what is really important is to have a good night's sleep.
I can just tell a little story about how I realized, because I think also what you're asking is that upscaling, as in like how does it feel? And maybe I'm a very naive person that is very sort of like in the moment. And the first American movie I did after whatever 3-4 European movies, I remember thinking, oh wow, I mean, I've never been to the States. And then it was a movie called Girl on a Train. And I remember sort of realizing, oh, it's probably what you call upscaling, but I didn't think very much about it. So I wasn't on top of myself. I rarely am. And I realized that I wasn't, but I remember the moment when I realized that this is probably upscaling, which was walking to set the first day. And we were shooting along Fifth Avenue, and it was one of the side roads where all the trucks were parked. And I didn't realize it, but I was walking past truck after truck after truck after truck, and I was just walking, not thinking about it. And I sort of couldn't find the set. And and there was a production assistant or something, there was a runner there, and I was like, where is this set? I'm the DP, and I'm trying to find the location, and she's like, well, these are your trucks. Are you going to the camera truck? And I was like, yeah. But the set is, I continued another block with white trucks. And I realized, I'm the DP. Shit. And I just remember that first day going, really? So that emotional thing, I think I didn't realize till I was actually, I think I didn't understand. So I think it's also something that comes with doing. You can't really, because every experience is different from each person, and I'm a very naive personality, so I think it was in the moment, if that was a little story.
And also, I think the script drives you. I mean, you don't think like it's becoming big, but what do we need? And so it grows when the story grows. And just you take different tools, much more crew to use the tools, and that's it, but you don't really think about it.
Till all the trucks are there. Then you
Till all the trucks, exactly.
And for me, I learned a lot during my 14 years working as an assistant camera, because during this period I did around 30 or 35 movies, big, little, but I learned a lot. And when I start as a cinematographer, my first film, it was a big film in Africa, but I know exactly how to manage all the people. I just have to do that. I can do it. So I have to trust in me. It was the most important. And the third film I did, it was much bigger. I shot in Cinecittà, and I just arrived just after Tony Price Roberts, because he left the project because he doesn't collaborate with the director. So I arrived like that, and the production designer is a very famous guy. It was Gianni Caranta, and he told me when I arrived, and he touched me my shoulder, is it okay for your shoulder? But so at this moment I have to trust in me, and I did the thing.
So I think that there's a heart to your question that actually is maybe answered by saying that all cinematographers, when they start, so let's go with the notion that we're artists as opposed to craftspeople, which is something that's always debated. But you have to find who you are very strongly at the beginning, because otherwise, when that big project happens and you're crowded around with thousands of people, that's when you can get lost. So the work really happens, for me, between the age of maybe 20 and 35, where you have to find where your soul is and what nourishes you in conflict. And if you don't find that, then what John was talking about, you won't go to sleep. And now you might be a runner, a swimmer, you might be into yoga, tai chi, playing tennis. For me, it doesn't much matter what it is, but it has to be physical, because it's a punishing business. And if you don't have a physical way of dealing with it, I think you're going to be in trouble eventually, at some point. But it's even more than that. It's your soul, really. And there are many times for all of us, and all the people in the room, I'm sure who are cinematographers, where you're alone with your thinking, and around you is kind of mayhem. I remember that it wasn't Gordon Willis, but there was which DP was it? Anyway, he put his eye on the eyepiece and closed his left eye. It was Conrad, that's right, Conrad Hall. And people would think he was looking through the camera, but he wasn't. He was thinking. He was having a timeout by just, and of course you'd touch him. He was there looking through the camera. Now it's harder with a digital camera, unfortunately. But that kind of mini timeout is something you do a lot as a cinematographer on set. It's almost seconds where you just take a beat and then you reply, or you do this, do that. And that doesn't matter, small or big. But if you don't develop that sense of how to come back into yourself, you're in trouble. You can be in trouble. So it doesn't really relate, I don't think, to whether the picture's big or small. That's just nerves, and you should have nerves. That's what actors say, don't they? You're always terrified. And that's good, because it wakes you up. So, okay, we should move on to, yes, at the back there in the middle. Yep.
Hello. So I've written it down. As we grow as creatives...
Sorry, say that again.
As we grow as creatives, the questions we ask ourselves grow and change with us. My question is, are there any questions that you guys keep asking yourself in relation to your current perspectives? So it could be about something along the lines of how something is in the industry that you potentially don't agree with, or just anything sort of like philosophical. Or...
Okay, so the question is, are there things happening in the film industry that
just kind of like
that we're unhappy about? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or just kind of.
Not at all.
Big question. Sorry, is it?
Yeah, or just kind of like questions that you're asking yourself that are kind of like, I don't know, just especially in your perspective as to where you're at right now.
Okay. Well, who would like to crack off with that one?
You can come back to it if you want to.
No, that's fine.
I mean, sometimes one of the questions that I ask my directors, and then eventually I am asking myself, is what is this about? As in, like, what is this scene about? What is this meeting about? Because sometimes, like, you can get into these big, large conversations about things that are slightly different to what you were meant to be doing, and this happens in scenes, and this happens in meetings a lot. At least I found it that way in my experience. Where it's like, why are we here? Like, what are we trying to do with this scene? What are we trying to do with this meeting? What am I trying to do with this script? What is it about that I am interested or driven by the story or the person I just met? And I think that, I mean, it could be scaled to different aspects of not just the relationship with the cinematographer, with the project or with the team, but also with the larger idea of your work and the industry. I'm not sure if it's going that direction what you were
Yeah, it's kind of
wondering.
yeah.
I mean, asking, I think personally, my big question always is me. You know, is it good enough? There's always, and things are not easy on a set. Sometimes it's super fun, sometimes it's not fun at all. And those days, I think the question always, in my mind, always goes back to me. You know, because you have to fill out. I think that's an never-ending question for me. Is like sort of trusting that what I do is the best for the film or for the project. You know, so there's a never-ending question about filling out the expectations. And then there's a bigger question in my head, which is about the industry and is about the big budget money versus art. You know, and that thing of can we bring all your visions and our visions into the bigger budget? Like, is it a choice of going big movie or, you know, or smaller movie, and you can be who you are, like that mix of what does it mean to work on a big budget? Does that make any sense? So that's more when you're reading scripts and you sort of building your career. Those choices. Does it make sense what I'm trying to say? The choices of each step that you take is always a big question because you can't figure out the future. You know, you're all trying to build your careers, and that's a never-ending question as well. I don't know if that answered something. It probably more ask more questions, but
yeah, the big projects aren't necessarily the better projects, and that's definitely true. But what is absolutely for sure, here we are, and there are 5 women to 4 men. So the quality of the sexes in cinematography is now even. In fact, there are more women probably now than there are men, which is lovely to see.
I don't think we're even just yet.
Sorry,
but not even just
yet.
Way better than we've ever been, for sure. But I think it's going to just take a long time, just starting from like 0 female cinematographers. But yeah, no, it's definitely not even. And unfortunately, you still feel that on set as a female. You do feel that inequality, and at times you are treated differently by collaborators. Some people that are your close collaborators and department heads. Sometimes you get great people; they automatically respect you. But sometimes there's a period of time where you have to earn that respect before you get taken seriously. I don't know if y'all experience similar things as a woman.
I didn't partly answer the last question, but it intervenes with what you're asking. For me, it's telling the story differently in different films. It's not falling back to what I did before. And then to answer partly the other question, it's about hiring people better than you are and giving them credit. It's your team. It's the relationship. I mean, my gaffer I've worked with for 35 years. He's had more experience than I have, and I can rely on him, but he understands what I'm looking for. And so it's to surround yourself with people that know more than you do, that you can trust, and they trust you. So I think that's an important aspect of it. Because as much as the director has to trust us, we have to trust the director. So it's a two-way street to find that relationship.
I like to ask, like for a script, for a project, it's asking why a lot. Kind of what you were saying is, why does this scene exist? You know, what are we trying to say with this scene? Whose perspective are we in? You know, it's asking those fundamental questions about the story and the characters, and so you can translate that into imagery. Yeah, that's it.
Well, I was just going to say, this stage is great. I think it's the numbers that, you know, having this many women and men, I think is a reflection of just storytellers, right? It's like, because minus all the technicals and before when maybe you've interacted with people if you're a female DP, where they're like, oh, you can't hold the camera, or this is too technical, which, you know, I would hear maybe 10 years ago. But, you know, we're all telling a story. There's a lot of female photographers. It's just you're bringing out your own creativity that's so personal. So that's all it is. But in the job market, it can be very narrow for, you know, in America at least, seeing not that many women on set. But it has changed and it's gotten a lot better. But I feel like I've liked coming here because I've seen so many amazing women and I've met them. But then also a lot of women have come up to me and just talked to me about, like, you know, you have to kind of see you to be you. So, you know, it's nice to be able to see it, because I'm not sure I did 10 years ago when I was coming up. I would be in this room and there would not be as many women. So I think it's great. Yeah.
Okay, this gentleman here.
Hello. My question concerns a specific topic, basically breakthroughs. I'm really curious to know whether or not breakthroughs is something that's on your mind. I'm going to specify what I mean by breakthrough.
Did you say grapefruit?
Yeah. Breakthroughs.
Oh, breakthrough.
Breakthrough.
Okay, got it.
I'm going to specify. Like a couple examples, and you can start from the beginning of cinema history with the breakthrough of the camera itself. The magic lantern, to cinematographers and directors who've tried to go beyond what can be imaginable and what can be shown, with like Buster Keaton or even Bergman with Summer with Monica, showing what can't be shown on screen, to, you know, Star Wars and Blade Runner, imagining worlds that couldn't be imaginable. And so I wonder if these breakthroughs or looking for a breakthrough is still something that's on your mind, and if so, how important are radical ideas and going against the grain and trying to push through for something that you know, is not accepted and it requires a lot of hard work, and you have to accept that you become the antagonist, right? Because it's not something people want, but yes, it's something that you want to see on screen. And yeah, so, and also this was also in relation to the previous question about shallow depth of field and how we're slowly accommodating technology and basically doing cinematography that makes our cameras work better. And so, you know, we're making the camera, trying to sort of, yeah, the human work is accommodating the camera work. And so how do we make things harder instead of easier? Basically, that's the question. Sorry.
That was quite a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay, but in essence, you're interested in, say, take Blade Runner, disaster in the box office, didn't do well, now is an absolute icon of great filmmaking. So is that what you're talking about? How do you achieve breakthroughs?
Yeah, what is the environment? Should we, for example, start dumbing down the technology we use? Because if we use technology that makes our work easier, then we're not struggling, and if without the struggle, then we're not pushing, and without pushing, then we can't try and, you know, and achieve and have aspirations and ambitions that go beyond just you know, having a nice image.
Okay, anybody want to pick that one up? Anybody understand the question?
I can try.
Okay.
I'll pick a little bit of that, because I think there was a lot in it, but the middle bit I sort of connected to, which goes back to a little bit what I was trying to say before, which maybe I sort of came out a little clumsy, but that thing of, I think what you're asking is also the choices. And are you asking, like, you know, are we looking for breakthroughs? Which would, I think you're saying, like, the bigger movies, like, is that what the question is? Because I just want to say, it goes back to the previous question, that's an ever-ending question.
He
asked about the importance of radical ideas.
Okay.
You change or you just follow the routine.
All right, so the importance of radical ideas.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. He's on our jury, he's very smart, so that's good. Thanks. Okay, importance of radical ideas.
Well,
Ed.
I would say, honestly, we just try to get through the day. You know, you have a schedule, you have an AD on your neck, but what you do is in pre-production, that's where you play. You know, or at least that's where I get a chance to play. And someone like working with Todd Haynes, he has like 1,000 ideas. So it's always kind of whittling down his ideas to what we do. But to me, the most important part is you play in the pre-production with different visual ideas. And then the hardest thing I find is to be consistent, because you don't know, the footage doesn't maybe speak back to you, every day. And you might only really see what you're doing stylistically till they really are in the editing room with it. So you just try to be true to what you're doing each day and not see some cool shot, or generally the director comes, he said, oh, I saw this incredible shot in Thelma and Louise, they lit the background mountains, so great, but I don't know if that works for this film. So that's, for me, the hardest part, is just to be consistent each day with what you're trying to do. And then what comes out of that, you're the best audience.
I think it's about not letting the radical ideas drive the cinematography, but letting the story and the characters drive maybe the radical ideas is the result. And I think it's important to be unconventional and think outside the box, but don't just do things gratuitously and just because, like you're saying, it is a cool shot, but what's motivating it is the bigger question. And if that requires something unconventional, then, and if that's the more powerful way to show it, then of course do that.
I think it's important to say that the kind of radical ideas that drive the future of cinema come from writers and directors and producers, not from us.
Yep.
But the kind of radical ideas that we can contribute, having got the script and the gig, the job, is that not to be afraid to push into areas, but that demands the trust of the director. And we are kind of interpreters and translators, if you like. And sometimes directors are very internal people with a lot going on in their head, and we have to kind of pull it out and turn it into imagery sometimes. But they come in all shapes and sizes. So some are going to go 50 mil T4 here, and others are like, how do you want to shoot this? And you have to deal, with the whole breadth of it. So, but in terms of future, it'd be interesting if someone who's more au fait of what's going on right now on the panel can tell us, how are they going to maybe radically alter cinematography in the future? I think that's an interesting question.
I think there is a key thing, as you said, because we're collaborators of directors, and the directors and all of us have a way of looking at the world, and the way that the newer generations, people who are 10 and 15 and 20, those are the ones that will be directors in 10, 15, 20 years, and the way that are experiencing storytelling and experiencing even depth of focus because of the way that we shoot and the way the tools that are the images that we consume every day is going to shape radically how we, what are going to be the trends. I mean, obviously the machines that we're going to be using, but how our directors want to tell stories, because it's the way we have grown up telling stories. I mean, I'm young, but I have seen a lot of films in film. I was in the cinemas with film projection, and that probably was one of the, I think I was the last generation that had that experience. And I still remember films that really moved me, that were shot in film and projected in film. And I'm not sure if my sister, who is 7 years younger than me, had that experience. And there's a time that this generation is gonna become the future filmmakers, and how they imagine, or how they wanna replicate stories that have moved them when they were younger, because those stories are now projected in a different way, and probably are the films that are being made and shown at this festival, and will be shown in the next few years, the ones that will move the directors that will be telling stories in 10, 15 years. So I think that is a question to think in terms of the technology and the storytelling and the shape and form and length, and how we will translate those stories into images.
And also, I'm pretty confident that many people in that room are very afraid of routine. So even if there are trends in our job, we also want to make things each time a bit differently than before. Maybe it's not going to such a radicality, but anyway, it's not repeating itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tools are there always to serve the story. So it's like if you're you know, I grew up I grew up shooting film at my film school. So my context for what I like or what I feel like, you know, is emotional and nostalgic is always texture and filmic. So I'm always trying to make digital look like film, whatever those choices are. And I think even though the technology is getting better, you know, if you have a very sensitive camera, I have friends, you know, that are DPs that are shooting at 6,000 ISO, and that's going to frame your whole process in the way you work and your crew and your lighting and your budget and the structure that you're giving the director. So that's also being brave, you know, using the technology to maybe go like, I only need a few units. You know, your locations differ based off of the fact if you're going to shoot at 6,000 ISO. So I think there are also ways to use the tools that are very technical, but I'm always thinking that when we do that, we still are trying to bring them back to having texture. And, you know, I'm always like, you know, I love virgin suicide. So when I'm thinking of like what I like things to look like, it's always something that it's emotional if it has layers, and so that's also back to the T-stop. I mean, I think coming from like medium format portraiture, I center punch everything, and I like the background to fall off because I'm always looking at the person. At least that's something that I like to do. But we're here to be brave, so any chance you get to photograph anything, be brave, but always remember that those choices should serve the story.
Yes, I mean, just one last thing on that subject, like Tangerine, shot on a phone, that's radical, right? And it succeeded, so very brave. Yeah, okay, so we should move on.
Hi, I have a question, or I would like to hear about the preparation, the imagery finding in the preparation and the imagery finding on set, how the balance is for you in that, and how much you maybe rely on your gut on set to say, okay, I see this now, I'm in the room, we're going to do this, and how much is in the preparation in your head with the director together?
Yeah, so one thing actually that if the panel could contribute to that would be what I call the reference generation, because everything I see now with students coming in is they come in with tons of reference because you can pull it off the internet so easily. Whereas, you know, us oldies, we didn't have that because reference meant going to the library or hiring the film to actually project it in the cinema. So I'd be quite interested to, you know, in relation to that prep versus shooting question, like what is prep and how do you prep?
Well, in my case, Todd does a lookbook, and it's for each department. And I do my own lookbook. But all that preparation is really to be in the moment when you're on the set. He comes in with a detailed shot list, but we will alter that shot list once we see the actors. And it's so important to be in the locations before you're shooting there. So you've worked out all those problems, and especially for young filmmakers, I think it's very important to break the script down with the director and talk through the shots. So it gives them the confidence when they're on the set with you that they can deal with the actors and the storytelling. And then if things change, they at least have the security to know this is how we could do it.
Yes, I agree with that. And for me, the preparation is a very important time. So I used to be a very long preparation with the director, with the set designer, with all the crew, with the costumes, all the department. And during this period, we find the key of the film for me. And before, when we shoot in 35mm, we have to choose, to do the style of the film, we have to choose the film stock, principally, because it was, this is the important thing. Now it was more the camera, because a different sensor, and all the workshops you will do after with your colorist. So that I do, it's just before the shooting, after the end of the preparation, I did test, we decide to choose, and in the real set, with the real costume, with all the character, and after that, with my colorist, we chose a different look to put inside the camera. And we did the shooting with all the decision we did in preparation.
For me, there's a part of the prep that is that, and there's also another part that is knowing who is the director I'm going to be working with, as in like, how do they think? How do they see things? How do they understand the script? What do they want to, you know, sometimes like some of them, I come across directors who want to think on their own in silence and then communicate, and other directors who want to ask you questions, and other directors who need them, like, want to walk with you and tell you where the story is coming from, directors who want to watch films together and not talk about the film we're making. And for me, that's a big part of understanding what's the language I'm going to use in this film, not just on like my own prep or my own needs, but also how am I going to communicate with this person, how to, like, the images and the stories, because there's a moment that we're going to be in the middle of the battlefield and there's not going to be much time, and I need to understand if this person is the kind of person that rather me pulling them apart and say, hey, I don't think really this is working, or is a person that doesn't want to doesn't want me to give any advice on things, and it's just executing what we have decided. So that's a key part for me to understand what what are the tools that I need to pull out on that project.
Yeah, and it's not, it's obviously the director is the most important person that you go through the script with very carefully, but also the production designers. There's a whole bunch of, the whole visual aspect of the filmmaking and the process needs to be talked about, and the colorings of the costumes, as opposed with the art department, and the shape of the art, where the windows are. Everything has to be prepped, and for the look of the film. And it's crucial that all creatives get together and talk about it to get the style that you want for the film.
Okay, so one last tip I can give you for cinematographers in the room who are starting out is there is a terrible tendency that's grown up over the last 10 years where day one is, oh, let's go scouting, or day one is, oh, let's look at the schedule. Day one is some practical thing. Day one is when you work with the director, so make sure that happens. Get time with the director and no one else in the room. And some directors, they kind of like to look at their phones, so get them to turn that off. Because you cannot be distracted. You need proper time, quality time.
Yes, I agree. And some directors don't like to prep that much, so you kind of have to pin them down, and that can be challenging. But just, it's because that time can be so sacred, and it's about, especially if you've never worked with them, about building that trust. So like you say, when you get on the battlefield, they know you have their back, and you're always coming from the place of the story and coming from trying to convey their vision with integrity, and you have their back. I think what you're asking about references, yeah, I think all of the internet references are great, and there's so much out there, but I think it's important to be diverse and well-rounded with your body of references, so it's not just other stills from films, but paintings and photography and music and poetry, whatever it is, it's just, it reflects your perspective as an artist, and that's like constantly looking at art and photography, and I have my own visual library on a hard drive, so I like to curate that myself instead of. And I go to Shot Deck, and I think it's awesome, and especially for like specific things, like where I think they're the tool of just being able to type in keywords for like very specific things can be helpful. But having my own library of what I'm drawn to that I can pull from has been really helpful over the years, and I'm just constantly adding to that.
And it can be very odd. I mean, I remember doing something with Philip Ridley, and he had composed the music for the majority of the film, which was set in a forest. And as we were trying to scout forests, we'd listen to the music that he'd picked. And so that both the music and the forest and the sort of feeling of the forest matched and worked. So it can be done in very different ways. And that's the way he wanted to do it, which was unusual.
Yes, the lady there in the middle. So we've got.
Hello. I wanted to ask, I mean, this is probably a question which is asked a lot, maybe, but is there anything that you regret not doing, or something that you would tell your younger self, which you would actually should have done? And the other question is there anything that you're particularly proud of?
So, is there anything you regret not doing in terms of film?
Yes.
All right, that's good to clear that up. Lord of the Rings.
Could be like anything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to always take jobs to figure out what you like and what you don't like. So I think some of the jobs that I've done, maybe that I look back on and I'm like, there was a reason I took that, and I obviously learned a lot from that, and that guided me on the next job that I did take. So you have to learn as much from your bad lighting, your bad camera placement, your bad choice of crew, your bad small movie in the middle of nowhere where you slept in a corner in a shack. All of these things I think inform who you are, and when the time is right and you get that movie that kind of places you in the industry, all that stuff that came before it was so important. And you might not see it, right, because you're only looking ahead, but I think, yeah, I always try to make decisions based off of the people, because I like who I work with, or I tend to want to like who I work with outside of just shooting with them. So that's really important to me, to like them as a human being as well. So I kind of roll with that from the beginning. And then also, my proudest thing is that I had a son. I mean, I took time out of my career to have a family, and this business is very, very hard on families. So I could have easily not have done that, and I would have regretted it. So I'm happy I did that, and it informed my work after. So.
I made a disastrous decision right at the beginning of my career when I was very good friends with David Fincher, and he was working a lot in England, and we did commercials and rock videos and things like that. And then he went back to LA, and he asked me if I wanted to join with him and form a company. And my wife had just had twins, and I was worried that it might be a bit risky and things like that. And he said, "Oh, okay, fine, I'd love you to come. We could form a company. I want to call it Propaganda." And I didn't say yes.
Yeah, but don't forget he fired most of his future DPs. Was it?
I mean, I think a lot of times, many nights, after you wrap, you go, "Oh my God, I should have just put that light right there. I should have turned that one off." But I think, it's I keep a journal, and after every job, I just write a list of what I learned, the biggest lessons, so I can remember. And whether that's how to be a better manager, or, what kind of crew I like, just all those little things. And then I'm proud of just not, just being from a small town in South Louisiana, and not having gone to film school, and just sort of kind of learning this as I go, and being able to make a career and getting paid for it. And yeah, really proud of that.
Yes. Rudiger.
Yeah. It's a very broad question. Okay, thank you. I threatened to you to ask this question before. It's a question to all of you, very general. What is, in your opinion, if you can describe it in a short way, good cinematography? Not a good cinematographer, but when I watch a film, how can I see it's well done by the cinematographer?
This got brought up yesterday in the Sven Nykvist panel, and it was interesting because I always say beauty is not a criterion for good photography. What is the authenticity for me? What is the thing that's believable for the audience to enter the story? And I say it like this. In literature, you can enter the interior world of the head of the characters, because in the writing they can tell you what they think. In film, we have just the opposite problem. We can show place, where you are, but it's much harder to show the interior world. So that's what I'm always working for with the directors, showing the interior world.
Just jumping off that, we did talk about that yesterday. We watched scenes of clips from Scenes from a Marriage, which is, probably all have seen it, but a very, very fascinating and amazing film. And we were discussing that thing, if you pause at any point in that film and we discuss that image, it may not be the most amazing image. But when you play the scene, there aren't many films that makes me, like, I feel I see everything, I feel everything that they are. So I guess our job is, it's an emotional journey. You know, it's a moving camera, it's an emotional journey. And I think the photography is about, I cannot say the word, but you said it yesterday, authenticity. And that doesn't mean beauty. So the beauty comes from those emotions, I think, and that's what we're all trying to create in collaboration with directors and our characters.
Yeah, there is a quote by Jean-Luc Godard about that. I'll say it in French, because in French it's a play of words, but then I will translate in English. Est-ce que c'est juste une image, ou est-ce que c'est une image juste? Is it just an image, or is it the right image? And I think it's about that. I mean, it's not all about beauty, it's more about rightfulness.
And Godard says the image is the narrative is the image. So that's the question, does it reinforce the image? It's not to say that you can't make beautiful images, but is that the image that reinforces the story?
Yeah, I think it just always has to be about the story, I think, because these days there's so many tools to make things look pretty, and we're just oversaturated with imagery and content. So, you know, a lot of younger DPs I'll talk to, you know, they're always trying to use haze and asteras and color and light, but, you know, they're forgetting that we're here to serve the director and to serve the story. And I think I recently saw something here that I was very surprised by, and I was actually inspired, because I was like, I didn't know about it, I saw it, and it was very unique, and the photography in it really helped tell the actual story, and I was able to connect to the characters emotionally by the decisions that the DP and the director made. And I think that's when you have successful photography, and that takes skill and practice and like really knowing where to place the camera so it's not distracting, or it's not just about you know, to be flashy. So that's not easy to do all the time. So I think, yeah.
And I think the image is not purely two-dimensional. I mean, I think the art of cinematography or making image is actually to create the three-dimension, is to create what you don't see as much as what you do see. You know, if you have somebody crying and you see them from behind and you've lit it in a certain way so that you can feel the depression that person has, is it better to cut to her face or his face? Does it reveal too much? Is it better for the audience to imagine the way they cry while looking at that? If you know the character well because you've seen the film and that this character's been in the film all the time, make the audience imagine things. Make the audience get involved in the three-dimensionality of the images that you create. And I think that is an important aspect of actually cinematography.
Yes, you're right. On the acting, it is very important to the cinematography, because sometimes when you're framing and the acting is so wonderful, you are so intense inside the camera, and so the cinematography is not the same if you suddenly you are not in accord with the characters, with the acting. You know what I mean?
I think good cinematography is often the cinematography you don't see. And I always wanted every film I shot for the audience to exit the cinema talking about the film, not the photography. So I think for me it's about being quiet and serving the story, and the wow, what a great shot, looks good on a show reel, maybe. But once you get into narrative, it's very different from commercials and pop videos and short form. And you all know, when you watch a great movie, you're not watching the photography, you're watching the movie. I also think you should work for the film, not the people, if that makes sense. I always work for the film. And then there's people around and they'll just die one day, but the film will be, film's forever, right? So, we all just disappear. Yeah, okay, actually you were first, yeah.
Could you talk about the different motivations for picking a project?
If you have the choice.
If you have the choice, yes.
I think there are many, but two very important ones are the story, the script itself, and are you drawn to it, and do you feel like you have something to contribute, and the director and their perspective, and do you see eye to eye with this director, and can you work with that person? Those are the two strongest things for me.
Yeah, that has to be the case, and also, taste. I like human stories, and I'm drawn to human stories, human dilemmas. That's what those are the sort of stories I like, all comedies, and other people like special effect films. And so you choose it for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think also your lifestyle, you have to consider that. Like, if you want to do a lot of commercials, that's a different life than doing features. If you like to do short films, if you like to travel, if you like to see how light falls in different countries, like all these things play into your career, right? Like right now I tend not to take jobs that, travel too much because I have a family, meaning like all over the world. I obviously have been away from my family doing my last projects, but yeah, it's just, you have to consider everything. I don't think it's just about like, what job is it, who's the director, who's the script. I think it's important to decide how it's going to feed you and like, your journey and like where your life's going, where you live, who you're going to be around. But taste, I think, is huge. Like, I think number one, taste and trust. Like if you're assessing like this person that is asking you to give them your life, or like a year of your life.
Okay, is the script cinematic, is the other thing, or is it just dialogue?
I agree that there's two factors, either the script or the director's vision. But this brings up an interesting point. Not all directors are visual. So you have to decide, will they let you contribute? But the truth of the matter is, the best directors I've ever worked with are visual. So you can't make the film around the director because they won't realize it in the editing room. So it's very important that you decide in that interview. Of course, we don't always have the choice. If we want to get our work out, we take whatever film we can get. But at some point, you have to decide, will this director let me contribute to their vision, if they have a vision?
Okay, so I think that gentleman was next with the blue.
Thank you. This is maybe more to do with US, but how you deal with stress when you're getting a phone call from studio? Like you have you have your vision with director. You do storyboards. Let's say you prep for something, and you love your idea. You love what you're doing. And then you get in the phone call that it's too dark, it's too tight, it's too bright, and they want you to change that stuff. How you deal with the stress? How you to make everybody happy?
So in essence, you're saying, how do you deal with, you've done great work for 3 days, and then you get the phone call saying it looks rubbish and we're going to fire you?
Kind of, maybe not fire, but they're like, we want you to do this way, and so it's kind of killing your idea, and.
Yeah, so in other words, interference beyond the director, but from producers, say,
exactly,
who want to do it differently. How do you deal with that? Okay, who wants to go on that one?
I mean, it has to go through the director, because whatever you do is a collaboration with the director. So, you know, if and when that happens, from my perspective, it would be a conversation with more people than just me, you know. So if we're doing something wrong, it would be the way I would deal with it would be obviously sharing it with the director and go like, well, how do we deal with this? Is this something that is actually a thing that we should consider, or is it something that we need to justify? And so I don't think I'd ever sort of go back defending my own doings in terms of the work, but I would always share it with the director.
Yes, I agree with you. We have to be in accord with the director. We have to be together. If there is a problem, if the director doesn't support you, there is a problem at the beginning. So, for me.
I also feel like they have to know who they're hiring too, right? Like if you have a style and you like to light things moodier, and you like to shoot, you know, anamorphic or spherical or whatever, it's like you want to be hired for what you're bringing to the table. So I think it's important when you're interviewing and taking jobs to make sure that's an environment where your taste level is going to be supported, right? Like I wouldn't want to go onto a job where they're telling me that everything has to be bright or lit, right? And then case by case, if you're on set and something's too moody and someone comes, you know, after you and, you know, they're not happy with it, then it is a conversation like case by case to talk about it. But as she said, it's really director driven, meaning like if you and your director are on the same page with that concept of moodier lighting, or that you're gonna have things fall, you know, deep into the shadows, that's already in prep something. So studios should know that's your agenda right off the bat. Like they shouldn't be uninformed about that, you know, and that's important. It's your job to make sure that everyone's all on the same page before you start shooting and someone starts getting bumped by the fact that you can't see two eyes on the actress or something like that.
Well, what I would say with that is you have to work with a strong director, and then he dictates to the studio, no, that's the way I wanted it. If not, then, look, I've been fired like 3 times on studio films, and it had nothing to do with the photographic quality of the film. In one case, without mentioning it, it was a signal to the director that they wanted a change. And they usually fire the AD or the cameraman because they're trying to control the director. In another case, it's because I got along too well with the director, and we were making the film around the studio. And they didn't like that, so they got me out of the way so they could control the director. So all I would say is when you work with a studio, you just have to have the vision of the director who's going to fight for what he believes in.
Yeah, if you haven't been fired as a DP yet, you're no good, okay? Because all the great DPs get fired because they have an opinion, so it makes sense. So the first time you get fired, if you haven't been, don't worry about it. I mean, you're joining Deakins and Lackman, me, lots of people got fired. So, because, you know, we have opinions, and there's a line where you go, sorry, and then they go, yeah, bye. And you go, thank God for that, you know? It's like, okay, Angus. No, microphone's coming, I think. Oh, maybe it's not. Oh, sorry.
No.
Oh, you've got the microphone. Let's go with you, and then Angus. So you go first with the microphone. Sorry, I didn't see you.
It's okay. I just wanted to get everyone's thoughts on safety on set. It's obviously a big issue right now, and because of recent events, are you noticing there's more attention to working hours or safety procedures? I'm sure it depends on the country you work in.
I can't cope. Safety on set, guys. You're not a health and safety officer, are you? Oh, okay, just checking. This is, I could rant on for about 2 hours on this, so I'm not going first, okay? Safety on set, who would like to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's paramount. And as cinematographers, we have a great responsibility. And recently I walked off, I didn't get fired, I walked off a shoot because we were doing 14-hour days, and there were 3 hours for my for all of us of travel, and often we were in traffic, so it was often 4 hours, and it was just physically too much. And my focus puller told me that she fell asleep at the wheel. I went to the producers, I said, this is not acceptable. You're gonna have to put my crew up. They said, no, we can't afford it. And then you put your foot down, and I left. And then they all left. So they were left with no crew at all at the end of it. So I think we have to be strong and be on top of it, and not be easy with producers. And the budgets are getting much, much smaller now, and often they cut. They don't give you what you're meant to get. You know, you do stunts. Nobody should be behind a camera if you do any stunts whatsoever that's anywhere near the stunt. I mean, it's simple, easy, but it doesn't always happen. And you just make rules, and those are very specific rules that you can follow.
There's some really important training. It's called active bystander. I'd really encourage you all to just look online and see what that is, because it's very fascinating, and it's about speaking up no matter who you are on a film crew. Whether you're sweeping the floor, if you see something you don't like, you have to speak up. And I think that's a very important development. There's the other side of safety, which is why I was being a bit cynical, because there is also a deluge of the wrong kind of safety. But safety on set is absolutely paramount, and we all know what's happened over the last 5 years. And it's up to all of you. Doesn't matter what position, you don't have to be the DP. You know, you need to call it out. It's really important. So.
Yes, I agree. It's very important.
Yeah, look it up. It's called active bystander. It's very interesting. It's just a half-hour thing. It's worth looking at.
I think we should spread the Danish rules, which is 8-hour days, and then if you work 10-hour days, you have Friday off.
We'll vote for that.
You have a family, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question. Angus, yeah.
So creativity. I mean, essentially, I think we're kind of creative guns for hire, where we sell our creativity, our own personal creativity, to the highest and quite often the lowest bidder. And you know, our creativity is to serve others quite often, and you know, it's a precious commodity. And you know, what do you do to serve your own personal creative needs and keep that creativity alive in you?
So the question is, what do we do for our own personal creativity? In other words, not the creativity we're contributing towards the film, but yeah, what do you do for yourself as a creative person for works that you might call your own, I guess? So yeah, that's an interesting question.
Well, I don't know. I go to galleries a lot. I go and see other people's films, you know, and I read, I paint, and I sculpt. You know, I just keep the juices going.
Yeah, I think I get inspired by, you know, I'll work on commercials in between when I do larger projects, and you know, commercials, you can kind of do a lot more creative stuff in a shorter amount of time, and you know, maybe be more aggressive with the tools. And so if you pick the right directors, it can be really rewarding, and you can just kind of, you know, get inspired that way. I mean, I spend a lot of time with my son and in between, and that kind of drives me. I'm always taking portraits of him, and you know, you're just seeing the world through a different perspective that's, you know, not as stressed out, big set, and just kind of looking at what he's looking at. So I think that's for me. I mean, we go to galleries and stuff, and he can get impatient, but I still find it fun hanging out with him.
I come to CAMERIMAGE and learn from you.
I did many photography, and I'm a collector, so I take care of whole equipment, whole print, all the thing. Cinema is my passion.
I travel. I mean, apart from traveling for films, I travel around the world to see the world from different perspectives.
Yeah, I like to take still photographs just to always just be seeing light and to be able to document light. And then I do things like sewing. I like to it just feels good to work with your hands, like multimedia stuff. I'll have like art nights with friends. We'll just get a bunch of like stuff and just make whatever. It's just fun. It's very cathartic, you know, just multimedia stuff, whatever. And then just seeing things like plays and theater and going to the symphony, of course watching films. Just trying to expand my perspective.
Yeah, I just realized as you were talking that I didn't think it was a creative, a secondary creative line, but I started designing clothing with a tailor, and that became a very healthy creative process that was nothing to do with creating images, and I thought that was a very interesting. Yeah, with a tailor, yeah.
It's fantastic, yeah. It feels so good to sew. It's very meditative.
Yeah, not about creating images, but something else.
Yeah.
I thought, it's very, healthy, I would say.
Healthy, yeah.
Yes, sir. Just one last thing on that is I think it goes back to what do you do when you're not shooting, and so the word creativity is, it's kind of a loaded word, isn't it? Because what's that, Picasso? But there's many versions of what that is, and for me, each period, each decade of my life, I think I've found a different challenge outside of the film industry to really get involved in. And I think it's really healthy to have a healthy outside life. Now, it might be family, or it might be sailing, or horses, or whatever. Or it might be drawing, or it's no one answer as to what you're going to do, but it's finding inside yourself what is fun. What do you want to do that's a fun thing to do in between films when you're unemployed? Remember, everyone at CAMERIMAGE is unemployed. Just remember that. So we can't, take ourselves too seriously. So, okay, yes.
Hello, I'm Ernest. I want to ask you about your development in your career. Was there a point where you get to, in your mind that you are reached now a level where you can say you are an artist? And when you show back, what was it, what was not there that you wasn't an artist? Maybe.
So the question is, was there a point in your career where you felt you'd sort of arrived as a cinematographer? Is that the question?
Yes.
I think we're all...
No.
So no is the answer. I mean, that's true in a way, because none of us feel we have arrived. I think we all feel we're just in an ongoing process, whether it's Alana or me, or, I guess I'm the oldest. But I'm still working and still alive, and
Yes, but the between, when you're looking back, when you was not so experienced, and now you have the experience and reach a level where you can say, now I'm an artist, that is, others sees me like an artist, and
I wish that would happen.
Yeah, because I think you're always striving to explore something else that that you haven't before. So you're always building on top of just it's just an ongoing journey. So there's never this moment of arrival, even though you have more experience than you did 10 years ago. It's just such a slow progression and just a constant evolution. And you get on different kicks and get on different things of what you're interested in, and you go deep in that direction, and then you maybe go in another direction.
I mean, the one thing that gave me confidence to be a cinematographer after I was a cinematographer is if you don't come up, being an assistant or a gaffer, to see how other people work. But I was very fortunate when I was young that I worked first with Robbie Mueller, and then Sven Nykvist, and then I was on the set of One from the Heart with Storaro. So I saw three different sensibilities of how they related to creating images, how they worked with their crew, and that gave me great confidence to do it myself. And I think that's why we're all here at CAMERIMAGE, because we can have that exchange with each other, and that it should give us all confidence to go out. You know, I saw like a young cinematographer's film, Being Elizabeth, you know, for a TV series. It was remarkable, this young cinematographer. Oh, I get fired. So that's all.
It's also what you want to do too, I think. It's like, I think younger DPs start out and you decide, do I want to make character-driven films? Do I want to make indies? Do I want to make, you know, 80 million dramas that don't exist? Do I want to make, you know, big budget, this and that? And then you're always striving to kind of get there. That's the goal, to be driven, to get to a place. And once you reach it, then you move on, right? You're like, okay, well, I did that. I saw how that was. And then what's the next goal? Like, what story haven't you told? You know, do you want to go to the countryside and tell an intimate story about, you know, one character? So I find that there is a goal. I've had goals, and then you kind of race towards them, and you do the work, and then it fulfills you, and then you have a new one. And each time you know, hopefully put out different work and tell different stories. Because, yeah, I'm not sure telling the same story over and over again is necessarily that rewarding, or at least for me.
Just very quickly, I know you want to move on, but I think that thing of calling yourself something is always very hard, because after all, it's a title. And I think that the thing I was agreeing with is that it may be more about that, when do you feel confident to actually do and show who you are as an artist, which is another title. I mean, when are you entitled to call yourself an artist? It's something that you don't do. I think it's a feeling, you know. And then these are more titles that sort of describes what you actually do, if that makes any sense.
An artist is a person of first order originality. There you are, quote. Okay, there's time for one last question. Time has flown by, unfortunately. Yes, over there.
Thank you. Hi, I have a question concerning management. Having worked in the traditional corporate world, I can tell it's not a natural skill, and yet it can be crucial, especially when you are head of department. So, did any of you took a training in management, or did you just look at how your peers were doing, or what's the thing?
I would bet $100 and none of us took training in management.
I managed a clothing store before I got in the film industry, so that helped.
Well, when I was an assistant, I would say that I worked with DPs that were good leaders and DPs that were bad leaders. The DPs that were bad leaders were my best teachers not to do as they did.
Yeah, it's a huge part of our job, but I feel like being able to explain what you want, right? And that comes with experience. So I feel like I'm a better manager now than I was when I was doing, something 5 years ago or 8 years ago. And you just learn by mistakes, like how you're trying to guide your crew. And I think working with different crew, you start to develop your management style, because every, gaffer is different, every key grip is different. And then you start to figure out what kind of crew works well with your taste level, but also how you like to do your rigging or whatever it is. So I feel like you learn from other people if you are a good or bad manager, and you get better by working with various crews all over the, different parts of the world, actually, yeah.
I was born in the Mediterranean, and I have this little tradition that I invite for dinner or lunch to the crew before we start shooting, because I work in many different places, and sometimes I don't know the people, probably because I'm at the beginning of my career, but I talk to them on the phone or on a Zoom, and then suddenly you're just flown into the city, and then you're going to be spending some time with them. And I'm like, I want to meet them before I'm on set, because normally these things tend to happen towards the end. And I really, I need to know who they are, and I need to know that they trust me. I approached sometimes the crews with a bit of fear because they are normally much more experienced than I am, and they don't know who I am. They just see my name on a phone call, and sometimes I show up there and they don't understand that I'm gonna be their boss and their collaborator for so many months. So I found that was it was a very good experience for both of us, because they know who I am and I know who they are, and we tend to see each other in a different environment that is not a film set. So you like talk about their families, what they want, where they've been, and this is something that I think has been very positive. And one of the things that I actually learned, or like I was able to verbalize it more this week, is I was talking to a key grip for my next project, which is a TV series, and I was doing calls to a few different people. And one of them told me, wow, the way you describe the show is something that I talked to a line producer and this other person from the production team this morning, and no one really told me anything about the project, just some dates and some numbers. And I wasn't really sure if I was interested in doing this. And I realized that in general, I'm talking mainly about the crew under us. Sometimes are very much treated like technicians that are just like numbers of those days and those numbers, and are you interested, yes or no? And I found that that is not something I want to work with. Like, I want collaborators. I want to call people who know more than I do. I don't want to be afraid of asking for opinion and wisdom and knowledge from the people around me. And this is something that, in general, I feel like when I work with older crew, that they haven't found so much in their career. And I talked to this kid with a lot of experience, and I was like, wow, I didn't really, like, no one told me the show that way. Normally, not many people tell me the shows in this concept. And I was like, look, I want to do this. The TV show is about family and finding family, not in blood relationships. And I was like, oh, this is very interesting. And I saw this film, and then the conversation took to a different place that I thought was much more interesting than normally saying, you know, we're shooting these days, these hours. I think I need this machine, and I think I'm going to put the camera here, and I'm going to use this lens. Is that okay? But I mean, this is my way of working. Maybe for some people it's different.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I think it's just like putting yourself in their shoes and trying to think about what you would want to know. You're more than a technician, you're a collaborator. So sharing your perspective, sharing your references, sharing why you're doing this project, and empowering them to know that that you want them to collaborate, you know, and giving them that opportunity to make it better than it could be with just you, you know. I think that's so important.
Just super briefly, but the management is a massive thing of our jobs, but it's also a thing of not micromanage, you know, so that I think part of it is, for me anyway, is to find the people that I trust, so sort of finding the crew that is your collaborators. And then part of that is trusting that if you can express what the vision is and what is you're after, that you trust that they will bring things to the table, and then that becomes a collaboration. So I believe in not micromanaging things too much, so that it opens up for the collaborations and the talent that your team players bring. That you cannot do everything yourself. And then I think that's that sort of understanding where, you know, I'm not the best, and where your strengths and your weaknesses are, is sort of, in some ways, also the sort of personal management of how you set your team and who you trust and so on.
I don't know if this totally answers your question, but the first day on any set, I think, am I going to have an image at the end of the day? So but there's don't be afraid to ask the people around you what you don't know. It's when you fake it that they see that. And if you cut people off, like to communicate, you lose their support. I'm the first person on the set to say, oh, Jimmy had this idea. And then it's up to the director to decide if they want to use it or not. But give credit to the people around you, and they'll always be there for you to encourage you.
So the moment has come. Time has flown by. It's amazingly 3:30, which surprises me. So we're going to have to stop. Can I just ask the panel to get a picture of everybody together before you all rush off, and you come streaming down and start talking to everybody. Anyway, I just want to thank CAMERIMAGE generally. The big thank you for everybody, Kazik, Marek, and all the team for getting us here for 25 years or whatever it is. It's an incredible event, and those who are coming for the first time, I think you were blown away because it's amazing. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank the participants, because I think 3 days ago I had 2 people. So, you know, and I always try not to panic. And then I see someone and go, hey, come on the panel. And hasn't it worked out brilliantly? So thanks very much for coming. Thank you. Thank you very much.